Another thing is I always forward declare any functions that I'm going to define in the file that are not scene functions, and I'll show you the difference. And the reason I do this is because I like to have a listing. If you're a C programmer, you kind of know what I'm talking about. It's kind of like having the header file in one place where you list out all the functions you're going to have, and the body. Except for Lua developers, for Lua, you don't have the concept of two files, but you do have this concept of forward declaration. And what that allows us to do is create a variable, a local variable, with the name of a function, and then later on we create a function and assign it to that. But everywhere within our file we can call the function before it's even been declared. That's not exactly right. I'll show you what I mean. Another thing that I like to do, I like to localize. Now, we talked about this in a prior show. Localization is the concept of, in Lua, is you can have a function declared somewhere else, defined somewhere else, and the body of that function, if you want to use it, you need to do a lookup. So, for example, if you wanted to have a random number, typically in your code you would type math.random, and let's say we wanted to get a random number from 1 to 100. We would type some code like this. We'd say local age equals math.random, and let's say we want to make them from 10 to 20 years old. Age would then be 10 to 20, whatever came out of math random. Now, this is perfectly acceptable, but if you want that to run a little bit faster, what you would do instead is you would localize it. So what I've done here is I've said local mrand, which is a variable, and I've assigned it the handle of the random function. And so now my code, I would type mrand. And if I did this 10,000 times in a row, it'd be a lot faster than if I had done it with math random. And the reason is what's happening in Lua is every time we execute this piece of code, and this has nothing to do with Composer, but because it is part of the way I set up my files, I want people to understand why I do it. What's happening here is every time this line executes, so if I had, say, a for I equals 1 bazillion times, I'm going to do this. This would take forever because it's going to look up the function. It's going to say, aha, math. Okay, that's a global variable which points to the math library. It's going to do some math. It's going to find it in. It's going to find that pointer, in a sense, in memory, and then it's going to say dot random. Okay, now I got to go from there, and I got to find the random function. So all this work just to get to the point where it's ready to execute the code. Whereas if I do this, or up here, I already did that once. I've sort of dereferenced it in a sense. I've looked it up. I've done a lookup on where this function is. Now, it knows right where the function is. It doesn't have to do any of that previous junk. It just says, locally, where is this? Boom, found it, execute. So, go ahead, ask a question.
No, that's excellent. That makes a lot of sense, especially if you're spawning enemies or you're doing, doing whatever it is in your game. And
absolutely. Whenever possible, if you're going to be executing any function or accessing any global variable many times within a loop, within a short period of time, within one frame, you should localize it. Localize the reference to it. And I typically localize most of my stuff at the file level visibility. So again, what we're doing here is we haven't gotten into any function definitions. We haven't written any code. Hey Mo, your speaker's on. Your thing's on. And so we haven't actually even written any functional code at this point. All we're doing is setting up locals. So anything I set up before I do a function declaration, or definition, I'm sorry, will be visible within that function. From here on down in this file, all of these variables will be accessible. This is a question of scope. Okay, let me say one more thing. Be careful about locals in your files. There's a limit in Lua of 200 locals. within scope at any one time. So don't go crazy. Don't put everything in the Lua library up here and localize everything. Once you get to 200 locals, your code will mysteriously stop working. Or you'll get some weird error and you'll be like, I don't know what that is. Don't do that. Okay,